welcome to my first podcast. My name is Bogdan Markle, and this show is called Head and Mind. Basically, I want this to be sort of a therapeutical thing between me and my audience, but also somehow create some kind of dialogue, possibly. Maybe someday have guests on here once I upgrade my studio. Right now, it's just in my music studio, as you can see. But I feel that to sort of alleviate some of the loneliness I've had, I've been working on an album, so that keeps me kind of isolated. And I am going to work with other musicians and talent, but it's not for another few weeks, but for this past, I've been working on this album currently for about, so it was 2017, I think I started seriously working on it. So it's been almost 4 years. And it all started with my trip to Iceland. I was writing journals on what I think the current consciousness or current values were at the time, or should be, because I've seen, as everyone's seen online with the whole PC culture and that whole episode of things happening and what has gone to recently, you know, I saw the writing on the wall. I think everyone did. These people who are paying attention. So I wanted to make an album about sort of what the values of what people should have that could work for you, or things you should at least think about. So, but I'm not going to talk about my album too much more. But I want to focus on community, because besides the album, this is something that could help everyone that is lonely, but it's difficult right now, right? It's difficult to form a new community if you don't have one. If you know, like myself, I'm sort of a loner. I move around a lot. All my friends are married or older. Don't have a father in the picture. I have my grandparents and mother outside of the city, but at least I'm back around some family and have some minimal interactions. But noticing I've had some dips, and I'm like, I know what to do. I've been through this my whole life, so I know what to do. But the problem is, I think I was just sort of ignoring it somewhat and putting it aside because I'm working on this album and it's a big part of my life, and I also have a job. So, but everything is behind a computer, and there isn't any human interaction really, except for Zoom or telephone. And you know, it's sort of like it's like low resolution information. It's you know, back in the day, you would get an 8-track tape. My father had them. It sounded like crap. You know, you couldn't really hear. It was muffled. And then you got to tapes, and tapes were a little bit better. Records were good. Then CD came out and it was really clear. It's kind of like that same thing. It's talking on a phone is low resolution communication. It helps. It definitely helps. It's better than nothing. But you want that skin reaction when you see somebody. You get this visceral reaction and connection when you can look at them in the eyes. But until the pandemic, you know, ends, I wanted to implement these sort of things because I tend to be less social. I like to sit and, you know, I tend to sit inside, read, or make music, or, you know, tend to my own things. But when I start feeling down, I don't really do anything about it. I just immerse myself into more work, but that's not a good solution. It's not long term. So this idea about community was a big one, and how to even approach it. And I have social issues, mental issues that apply to socialism. I'm pretty much, have to admit, I'm on the spectrum for sure in autism. I've been like that my whole life, but didn't really realize it till later, as I got older, finding out I keep attracting friends that have autism or Asperger's, and I'm like, why do I relate to these people? And how is it that kind of just, when I meet them, they feel like I've known them for a while too? It's some of the habits, some of the patterns. I'm not as severe as most, but I do definitely have symptoms. And I've been doing a lot of work, a lot of journal work, a lot of behavioral therapy, self-behavioral therapy. Never really gone to therapy. When I was younger, I did, but they misdiagnosed me completely. So I finally sat down, like, okay, I need a concrete way of approaching all these things, because when I have a dip, I can't afford to have dips anymore. It's affecting friends that I've had, it's affecting lovers I've had, partners, and I I'm getting down to the bottom of it. And so community is a big one. And I was reading this website called it's NAMI, NAMI. It's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and focusing more on community is some of the topics that we're talking about. What I'm going to read this real quick. Community provides belonging, support, and purpose. Fitting into the world is very important. It's this acceptance that you feel like you're a part of something. That really helps your brain chemistry. You can feel the difference when somebody authentically feels you're part of the group. And I mean, today you see a lot of tribalism and ideologies going amok because people are lonely, people are scared, so they find something. They may not even believe in the thing, and they just go towards it just because they're people and they like them. And then they might think a different way, but they don't say anything in front of them. They say anything behind their back, and they just sort of rally behind each other, even though there's some shallow relationships. And that's terrible. I've never been like that. I think that's why I couldn't make friends as a kid, because I saw that even when I was a kid back in the 90s and late 80s, that there were groups of people that had their own little ideologies. And I was kind of like a person that always try to make friends with all different types, because one type didn't appeal to me because I felt, well, and I'm not talking about race either. I'm talking about personality. Race has no formulation in my reality. I think it's a really idiotic thing to focus on, because when you focus on something, it becomes sort of multiplies and it becomes an issue, and not to say we shouldn't talk about it, but it's the way we talk about it, and it's the way we focus on it. It's not about racism. It's about ignorance. And it's about education and being exposed to different things. And I've always exposed myself to different races, different music. It's not about that. It's assholes. There are assholes in every culture. I don't care what color you are. There's assholes in every culture. So I noticed that about me. I would always kind of move around different types of people, but I think I never kept friends because I had a hard time tending to the garden, if you will. You have to water all the flowers so they can grow. And I never put too much attention on most people. But what I did do is, if I found someone like a girlfriend, I would just attach myself to them and cut everyone off. And that's the worst thing to do. It's like I didn't know any social dynamics. I didn't know it was important, first of all, because when you're young, it's kind of like you can get away with a lot, for sure. But it wasn't until I was bullied a lot until probably 10th grade, and then I switched schools for the second time. In 11th grade, I finally had it. I had girls asking me out. I had cool friends. They weren't the best friends, but I had attention, and it made me feel good. And it's kind of like, at the time, I was like, I'll get what I can, right? And I had some good friends, actually, but they never hung out with each other. So there was definitely issues when we all hung out. It would never happen, to be honest. So that's my kind of C-, D+ community, if you want to put a grade on equality. It wasn't the best. It was a small town, so there wasn't much variety, and it was mostly Caucasian, and so that didn't matter to me. I always hung out with anyone anyway, but it just seemed like there was an uncomfortableness with other people approaching me, maybe because I couldn't figure out what I was. And because I'm mixed with many things. Not many things. As far as I know, 3-4 things. And so I had an issue with my identity, for sure. Like, who am I? What am I? What size should I take? Because I had friends that were mixed, that were maybe black and white, and they would, if they were more white, they would act white. If they were more black, they'd act black. I'm like, why are you doing that? Just be yourself. That's what I had to do, because I wasn't accepted in the Latin community. I wasn't accepted in the Polish community. It was like, but I think it was partly me avoiding that because there was some fear in there. But community was always hard for me to create, but they've come in spurts, and then moving to California made it so hard because everyone out there is so driven and no one has time for anything. And that's not a way to live, man. It's not sustainable. And, but yeah, belonging, going back to that, is one of the things that's very important for all of us. You know, your serotonin, just your dopamine, your oxytocin, just they go up and you feel good. But, you know, there's more that needs to be done: exercise, health, and so on. But going back to community, the second one, besides belonging, was support. You always need someone to lean on when you have issues. And I feel like that's getting less and less a thing, at least in my world, because people don't want to hear it. You know, I even have a girl that I was dating for a while. We're just kind of like seeing each other. She wasn't having it, even though that she sort of even put her hand out and say, I'm always there for you, but it was never true. And it's not her fault. She has social issues as well, but I don't want to go into that so much. But it was like, okay, that's nice that you're there for me, but it never happened. But I was always the same. I mean, she's a little younger than me. Not little, she's younger than me. And there may be a generational thing, perhaps. Although she's on the cusp of being not a millennial, possibly, but it doesn't matter. It's what you're surrounded by and what kind of health, how your health is at the time, mentally and physically. But there's a lot of forgiving there, but it just made me feel kind of bad that when someone reaches their hand out to you, they're not there when you need them. And there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of people just talking with nothing to back it up. And I've always been that guy. And I don't know if when I make friends, they just feel intimidated by that. I don't know. I always thought I was crazy, that I was doing the wrong thing. But I also realized the reciprocity wasn't there. I wasn't given enough. And I realized that later on, because my life's been full of anxiety. When you have anxiety, you cannot think straight at all. It's your memory goes, your attitude changes. You're always in a hurry for no reason. It's hard to socialize or go to parties or anything because the first thing you think about with someone on the spectrum that has anxiety is like, you go to a party, where's the door? When I got to get out of here. If I have to get out of here, it's like, because we think about all these different scenarios that could happen in a situation. We have to think about it all before we feel comfortable, and it takes a lot of brain power, and then you're not present. And I noticed that. But the only support and sometimes my own family doesn't even have my support as far as just basic communicate, like things I can talk about freely. I cannot talk about them because they're not well educated in what I'm going through, because they're all neurotypical, healthy family, and they're kind of stuck in a way, and they can't go outside of it. It's just like if you've never taken psychedelics, you don't know what it's like. It's like someone with no limbs trying to run. They never ran because they were born without limbs. And how can they know what running is even like? It's the same thing. So it's hard. So I just want to bring up to my mother and grandparents. They had no clue what I'm talking about. They think I'm nuts, but that's okay. There's people like me out there. There's friends I have that, not very many, but there's a few that understand what I'm going through and what others are going through. But support's a big one. I think if you're a leader, if you're older, if you had some experience in things, reach out to people if you can, because there's people like you out there, like you, all, everywhere. And the internet's just endless channels for that. It's just doing the work. And that's what I've been failing to do. But like I said, it's my fault. I trapped myself in this album for a reason, but I'm going through some hard times, and maybe I can mitigate with this podcast. I can mitigate that and keep it chill for a while, if you will. And so, yeah, just support someone. If there's someone having issues, give them a call, reach out, just care, act like you care, be authentic about it. The other one was purpose. I think it kind of goes back to belonging. I kind of referenced that, like purpose. You want to feel like you are a part of the community, that you may have like a role, and it also teaches us some responsibility too. But that's also good, especially if they want you. When you're a kid, and you play with kids and they like the way you play, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, they'll invite you back and you'll feel good because they invite you back, whether you're good or bad, as long as you play and don't try to force anything or take over and try to be a bully and so forth. And so that never goes away. Adult play, if you will, like, is if you have a neighbor that you talk to once in a while, you know, and they need help moving, they'll always remember that. So when you move, they'll help you. It's just reciprocity. And I feel that's an example of a role. And being involved in the community too, the bigger, like, city community, I would say, like, the best thing to do is just stay local first, because, you know, all of us when we were in our 20s or in college wants to save the world, but that never happens, does it? And none of that I can think of. There's been revolutions for sure, the youth revolution in the 60s. In the 90s, there was a little push for that, but the world is not just made of young people. They drive culture for sure and commodity, but this planet's made of adults, kids, and everything. And the only reason there's focus on youth is because of the market. Younger people buy more things. They spread information more because adults don't have time. But also, I think adults, when they get older, they get caught up in their own work and their own life, and they start to not understand what's out there, culturally. That's why kids know it better than adults, because that's their world. They don't have a job yet. They have the bandwidth to explore these things. And then when they tell their parents, they have no clue. So the parents have to catch up. So as an adult, past your 20s, you need to just dabble here and there, at least read about it, be involved in something, make, like, for example, social media a good tool, not a bad tool to spread hate or comment on things or trolling, whatever. But that's the way I see social media. And I've never been really on it that much, to be honest, just posting images and things that are positive, but they never get, like, any love. People want destruction, pain, and puppies or something. But yeah, purpose is a big one. And I had, aside from these 3 community bullet points, another good list. I like 3s. I like lists of 3s because you can remember them. And Bibles and all the ancient scriptures always have some 3 rules. You know, the Bible has Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and all these other examples that I can't think of right now. But there's always these senses of 3s because I think it's just easy to retain. And then within each, you break down in bullet points what those mean to you. But I heard this from, I don't know if it was a podcast or I read it somewhere, but I heard a story about a child telling his dad, I think I know the meaning of life, or happiness in life, or wellness in life, rather, is you need to have purpose, you need to have love, and you need to have hope. And those are great. It's almost like related to this too. It's, you need purpose, you need a job, you need to feel a part of a community. So this is kind of like a higher level, I guess, of that. And then hope is like some kind of spirit. I don't like to say spiritual because it's been sort of overplayed. But spirit meaning your soul. Your soul is like something that needs to feed on good information. And it helps lift you. And that one in particular is big for me because art is a big part of my life. I was a painter from age, I think I started painting, like, seriously, oil paintings when I was around 8 until, you know, beginning of college. And then I switched majors to a graphic design, which I wish I didn't now, sort of. I wish I would have learned graphic design on my own and just but it's kind of hard being a painter unless you're super good. But, so in that world, you're always thinking of ideas. You're sort of in a dream world all the time because you're thinking. Everything flows. And that was my world for a while. And a lot of that, as an artist, you question your mortality, you question the afterlife. You try to believe there's something bigger than you out there without putting a label on it. I think is the best way to do, because we don't know. We don't know what this is made of, and there's many theories on that, and I have my own, but that's not for this podcast. And love, which is the other one. It's basically talking about relationships and platonic love, even love for yourself. You need to have healthy relationships with people and yourself. And that also can relate to health and diet. And it's just appreciating everything around you. Be thankful for a toothpick, because without that toothpick, you do not exist. And that's true, because everything that exists has to exist in order for this present moment to occur. So, in closing, I guess, I wanted to maybe in closing talk about, I probably should have said this first, because this is kind of backwards now I think about it. I wrote down sort of in the community topic that these were the issues you can have when you don't have a healthy community. And I wrote loneliness, which is one. Language skills diminish for sure, because you're not talking. You may talk to yourself. You may do, I think this is a little more healthy than talking to yourself. Social skills diminish. I noticed when, not now so much, when I was younger and would spend a lot of time inside, I would go to a store and just kind of forget how to talk. You know, I'd have a format like, hi, how are you? But I would freeze sometimes, or mumble, or like forget what I was going to say, because anxiety would kick in, like, oh shit, I'm getting dumber. I haven't been around humans for a while. They're going to know. And that was horrible. And so that's one thing I noticed. Depression occurs. That's for sure. And creativity may replace the negative depression, but I don't think it's a long-term solution. You need a lot of input to have output. Diet may be affected. You may eat things to comfort you. You may eat sugars and breads, and I started noticing that too. I was out of control a little bit, but not so much. I would cheat a little over what I should be, but I'm not as bad as I used to be when I was younger. And then your confidence lowers, because you don't have, I think what's important is, as a human being, your sanity depends on your community. It's like a check and balance. What is culture thinking? What do you believe in? And you sort of like remap yourself accordingly, right? Even if it's insane with those people. And I feel like it's hard for me to remap myself with this generation going on right now, but it's not everyone, right? I think it's just a small number of people with the loudest voice for some reason. And I don't know what the percentage would be, but it's very small. Because if you go to a rural town in Virginia, for instance, or West Virginia, they don't have electricity. They clean not all of them, but maybe the Appalachia people, they clean their laundry in the river. They have outhouses. They hunt for their food. They have wood burning stoves and wood burning fireplaces. And they live so far out of modern society. Some have internet, but most don't. And so you go there and you don't have that same ideologies or hate speech and all that stuff going on out there. It's almost desirable, but modern humans tend to romanticize about going back into the woods, and that's not a good idea. We're not that good at surviving out there. If we had to, if the world collapsed, then we have no choice, right? But so there's hope in that. There's hope in humanity. The best thing to do is stay away from a lot of negative media and negative things, because it becomes your world. It's up to you to build your reality as best you can, but you need to match it. It needs to match with your current environment, your community, because if you're way out there, they're not going to understand you. So you got to be a messenger of your own reality in a way. You're like, there's a medium between you and your community. And so you have to be a really good storyteller. And this is also why I'm doing the podcast, is to speak more eloquently and increase my vocabulary and not be nervous. I'm not nervous behind camera. I mean, I'm a musician, so that part's not a problem. Talking is not really a problem. It's just articulating things on the fly that I may have problems with. And saying too many words to simplify something is another thing I have a problem with. I mean, artists do have the way they think is more like, you know, in dream states where everything's waves and kind of connections, and then we put them together. People that are more on the logic side or left brain dominant, if you will, I think they know exactly what they're going to say. I think because they repeat it a lot. I don't know. Yeah, I think this is going to be a good series. I'm going to start doing this at least once a week, and hopefully I get an audience. But I'll see you next time. Thank you.